Good morning and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's session. We have with us Lucy Barylak. She's with us often and we're so happy for that. She's going to be talking today about who am I? Talking about caregivers losing their identity as they're doing their caregiving responsibility. So it should be an interesting session. But before Lucy begins, let me tell you just a little bit about her if you have not heard Lucy before. Lucy Barylak has a master's degree in social work from McGill University. She is presently working as a consultant for a health network in Montreal, Canada. She has been involved in various research projects and has published numerous articles related to caregiving issues. She has lectured at several universities and colleges on innovative approaches to caregiving and presents annually at international and national conferences. Lucy is also a consultant for private industry in the United States, including her work with the WellMed Charitable Foundation and clinics in Texas. Lucy would also like you to know that she was a caregiver for her mother for about 10 years. Lucy, welcome to the session today and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Glenda, and thank you, Minerva, as well. Yes, as Glenda said, the topic today is what could happen when a spouse or a partner or any other family member becomes a caregiver for someone with dementia. So the title is, Who Am I? Well, I have to share with you that many times in my caregiving journey for my mother, I'm an only child, I asked myself, who am I? Especially just before I was falling asleep, extremely tired and exhausted. Yes, I was a wife, I was a mother, I worked full time, I was a caregiver, I had my own interests. And many times I would just say, well, what happened to Lucy? You know, I think it's so important because maybe some of you are feeling the same way because it's so hard to juggle everything. And the same goes for healthcare workers. We've gone through so many difficult years and still are with shortage of staff. And you might be saying the same thing when you go to bed. Who am I? What happened? You know, I do want to say that caregiving can be very rewarding, and it has been for me for many years. However, caring for someone with dementia can impact everyday life and results in emotional distress for primary caregivers and other family members. You know, the research tells us that caregivers have poor overall health compared to non-caregivers. A lot of research on that topic. You know, the psychological distress levels are much higher in dementia and Alzheimer's disease than in other types of caregiving. And too often family caregivers tend to find themselves in situations where they're actually sacrificing their own health, their leisure activities, and other stress-releasing hobbies. They tend to isolate themselves. They tend to, to really not take care of themselves the way they should be caring for themselves. And a lot of caregivers even stop working. I'm not going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So the impact of the disease, Alzheimer's disease and other dementia have a deep impact, not only on those who are diagnosed, but also on the people who are closest to them. You know, family members have to take on different responsibilities when a relative is diagnosed with dementia. Sons and daughters of a parent with dementia may become caregivers, and their own lives are impacted. As the disease progresses, you or others in your family may find the changing roles tough to accept. It may become harder when the roles change in some ways, but not in others. When this happens, it can lead to some confusion about how to act. It sometimes takes a while to figure out who does what. You know, the family member with dementia usually becomes the family's center of attention. All energy is focused on the person. This can lead to other family members, including spouses or other children, feeling neglected. They may become resentful because they feel they are not getting the attention they need. I remember at that time, my children were young. And even though they absolutely loved their grandmother, they were angry sometimes when I wasn't there, when I should have been. So caregivers and other family members need to accept that change in the family dynamic is really the new reality. And it's not an easy thing to actually deal with. So if Minerva, could you change the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So I really like this quote, coping with unexpected changes. The expected is just the beginning. The unexpected is what changes our lives. And that really is so, so true. You know, although we know it might one day happen, few people plan in advance to be a family caregiver. I mean, who thinks about it? We seldom know how or when a family member's health will change and our responsibility as a caregiver will begin. You know, with this unexpected change come unexpected feelings. And even though I always say it's rewarding, but a lot of feelings do come up, the feelings that I had myself, which could be like tremendous grief. There's a loss, you know, of that person. There could be anger, frustration, anxiety, depression, isolation. And you ask, why me? Why him? Why her? It's unfair. So, but I do want to talk that when one spouse or partner needs care from the other, the dynamic of the relationship changes. You go from familiar in many aspects of life to the reality that you are now responsible for that person. No matter how you feel, it's important to acknowledge that things really have changed. Now, I know that in the beginning of the dementia, things might not appear as they are as it progresses. But in general, when it becomes really difficult, it's in those stages of the middle stages and later on. Let me share a letter that I got. I shouldn't say letter, it was an email. I'm showing you my age writing letters. But it really reflects a lot of what other caregivers have told me throughout my long 30 years of working with caregivers. And she writes, Dear Lucy, my husband and I have been married for over 50 years. We have 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren. Paul and I have married very young, and in a way we matured and grew up together. Our marriage was like most marriages with its ups and downs, but we stayed together and built a life together. Paul was diagnosed with dementia 3 years ago. My whole life has been turned upside down. The daily care is not a problem. I feel like I lost my husband, my best friend, my partner, and I'm devastated. When I tell my children how I feel, they get angry with me and tell me that I should feel bad for dad and what he's going through. Friends no longer call or visit. I'm told to take care of myself. This is easy to say. I want my life back. I've heard that so many times. I'm angry, frightened, feel guilty, selfish, and feel very much alone. You know, so a lot of caregivers feel that way. And I have to say, as an only child, I feel that way also in many ways. I lost my mother. I lost the person who was my support system. And even though I had wonderful support from my family in general, and even my friends, but nobody could quite understand how I felt. So next slide, please. So let's look at the impacts on spousal partner relationship. And that goes along with when you're an adult child caring as well, maybe not to the same degree, but it does reflect that too. So there's tremendous loss, you know, not seeing yourself as a couple that you once were. You know, at the loss of the companionship, the shared activities, the shared history, and the responsibilities. For example, it could be like you're planning holiday planning. Christmas is coming up, right? And now it's really up to you to do that. There could be home repairs that need to be done, and the burden is on you. Financial issues. Really, all decisions that are made, that's not to say that some people cannot be included in that. But as the disease progresses, it becomes more difficult. Now, the role changes. You take over certain tasks that the person no longer can manage. For example, assisting them with their daily activities. It could be just a little bit, but for some people, it's even feeding them, bathing the person. For example, taking out the garbage that that person may have done before, car maintenance. There's the shopping, the cooking, the laundry, or making plans with family and friends that that person shared with you before. And one of the big ones, especially for women, there's a lot of research in that, the loss of employment. Research tells us that the majority are women who leave their job to care, which puts them in a financial stress throughout their lives. Even if they work part-time, they may not get promoted and possibly get fired. And some of them really face poverty. So these are things to take into consideration of what could happen. Now, let's look at loss of social activities and isolation. You know, you may also find that your relationship with friends and family has changed. Perhaps they hesitate to spend time with you because they're not sure what to say, or may worry about the person's behavior. Maybe when you go out for dinner, maybe they, you know, their eating habits is not what it was. Maybe they say things that embarrass you or embarrass them. You know, you may have belonged to a book club or church activity that you no longer can attend. And giving up those things really puts you in a position of becoming very isolated. So that's why we're going all through these points, just to kind of see if you can identify with any of them and sort of take a little bit more control for it not to happen. Now, dealing with adult children and other family members sometimes can be a huge problem. Sometimes they may not agree with the decisions that you're making. They have their own feelings. There's tremendous denial. That is really not what you're saying. Mom is not as forgetful as you think, or they are not willing to help with the caregiving needs. With so much focus on the person who has dementia, sometimes younger family members don't get the attention they need, as I said with my own kids, or the illness is not explained in a way that they can understand. For example, if you're an adult caregiver for your grandchildren, they may not know what happened to grandma. Children often experience a wide range of emotions when a parent or grandparent has dementia. Younger children may be fearful that they will get the disease or that they did something to cause it. Teenagers may become resentful if they must take on more responsibility or feel embarrassed that their parent or grandparent is, quote, different. And college-bound children may be reluctant to leave the home, which will certainly affect them in finding a job or just moving forward in their lives. Many adult children face the same issues when caring for parents who does what and how it affects their lives. Many caregivers, adult children tell me that it even affects their own married relationship. Whereas they want to go away for the weekend, so they're apprehensive, they don't know if they should go. It puts a lot of stress on them. I do want to talk about change in intimacy and affection. I do a whole series on that. So if any of you really want to have more information, you should always check our calendar. Dementia does not change the need for love and affection. It can, however, affect a person's interest in sex, either increasing or decreasing. So what I do want to say, if you are having a difficult time dealing with sexual demands from your loved one, please get in touch with their doctor as soon as possible and get the support you need in the community. Now, changes in language, loss of identity. So what do I mean by that? When someone asks you, how are you? Do you start talking about him or her most of the time? Or rather than about yourself? It happens a lot. Be careful that you don't lose your identity. For some people, loss of identity means they become whatever they're expected to be in a given situation. All right. And in relationship, this often means you take on the interests of the other person forgoing your previous interest in the process. Sometimes this scenario can happen when you're a caregiver as well. It's not necessarily you're taking on the interests of your loved one, but because you are a caregiver, it just that becomes who you are, and all you do is caregiving tasks. So let me clarify that not all caregivers go through all these changes in a negative way. It's important to say that. Some caregivers accept their new roles more easily than others, but I think there are two factors that play here. It all depends really on the care the person needs, okay? So if it's just a little bit of care, supervision, it's manageable. But as the disease progresses, if there's more hands-on that you need to do, it can become more difficult, as well as how the positive and close relationship was before the dementia. But what if the relationship was never a good one? What if you did not get along with your parents, your spouse, or your partner? Let me read you a letter that I got, and this represents a lot of what some caregivers tell me. Caregivers that feel that they never had a good relationship with that person. So she writes, "Dear Lucy, I was stuck in a loveless marriage. The divorce was not an option for me. We had children, the finances was an issue as well. I was scared to be alone. What would people say in our community? What would my family say? I find myself caring for a man who was never loving, was controlling, and at times made me feel like I had no worth. He has dementia, and I resent taking care of him every single day. I have to keep reminding myself that he is sick, but it does not help. I feel resentful and unhappy." That's a big thing to take care of. So very quickly, I did answer this person in more details and basically told her that she does need to find support and help in dealing and really looking at her short-term goals, because nobody should ever be put in a position of having to do something that they so much resent doing, because in the long run, all that's going to happen is the resentment will build up and things can just get out of control. So how do we deal with all these emotions, right? So how do you do it? Maybe we can go to the next slide, please. The key is acceptance. Acceptance is necessary for your healing process. Acknowledging all the uncomfortable parts of yourself, your emotions, your thoughts, and your past. The most important thing is to accept the person for whom you are caring for who they are today. And I want to tell you honestly, my journey, my turning point in my caregiving journey actually changed when I finally accepted my mother for who she was then, not who she was before, because she wasn't going to change and it just wasn't working. I had to accept that. I had to deal with all my feelings of sadness and denial and everything that came along with it. And I had to start looking at communication. How was I communicating with her? Because there were triggers. She could trigger my emotions too, not of any fault of her own, but just because of this disease process. So my communication I made a conscious decision to communicate on her level, on the things that she enjoyed. And if you listened to me before, I used to tell you that she loved having her nails done and her hair. I would bring different colors of nail polish. She would choose it. And we would start reminiscing. I would tell her things about the kids. I dealt with her in a way that I knew she could participate in. She loved music, so we used to listen to music. We used to sing together, because really music is one of the last things that goes. And many people who sing a song, a Christmas song, but they don't remember what was 5 minutes ago. I would dance with her. I did activities, and even when we went to the mall together, never to put her in a position where I would think that she would be uncomfortable. So acceptance is the key word. It's not an easy thing to do. And it does take many times to have some help individual, but maybe we could look at certain tips of how to actually accept. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So remind yourself it's not their fault. Their behavior is caused by the dementia. Focus on them as a person. Look at who they are today. Don't expect more from them than what they can do. And recognize that the person that you knew before is no longer there. Adjust the way you communicate. It's important. You've got to be patient. Watch your body language. They might not understand what you're saying, but if you look angry, they'll recognize that. Please don't yell. Stay calm. Show that you care. Okay? Be patient. Very important. Accept the new normal is now different. Don't change, you can't change what is. Stay in the moment and be grateful for what you do have. During the pandemic, I was so grateful to have a roof over my head and hot and cold running water and food. It's so important to do meaningful activities for yourself every single day. Focus on what you can do. The first thing you need to do is to stop and take stock of the situation. Sit down, lie in a tub, or go out in the yard, take a walk, do whatever feels the most comfortable, and take a good hard look at what is actually happening. The reality is that you are not a superhuman, as I was not, even though I worked with caregivers and was, very knowledgeable about what's going on. You are a loving, tell yourself, you're a loving, caring human being with many strengths as well as limitations. It is time for you to take time out, to continue pushing, continue pushing this. It's not helpful, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. It's time for you to step back when you feel the beginning of desperation, find a way to get some time to yourself. It does not have to be for long, but give yourself a time to regroup. So what we're talking about really is respite, to really put that as part of your everyday need. Continue to give and receive love. All right, it's so important. Find ways to show affection. A smile can go a long way, holding someone's hands, a pat on the shoulder. This is so important, not only for them, but for yourself, because you care about that person. Make the time to deal with your own emotions, get the support that you need. It could be individual counseling, support groups like today. We can talk about it later on. Or find a trusted friend that you can talk to. There are people out there. Next slide, please. Admit you are feeling this way. It's okay. You need to accept yourself. No one is perfect. All humans have flaws, weaknesses, and limitations, as well as strengths and good qualities. All humans have many different emotions. Although these emotions can often be controlled to some degree, controlling an emotion and not having it in the first place are quite different. For example, there's nothing wrong with experiencing anger, frustration, jealousy, sadness, or any other negative emotion. Experiencing such emotion is a natural part of being human. However, the real problem comes when these emotions are pushed down deep inside, or if a person feels guilty about having them in the first place. You need to accept that you are human and that you will experience these emotions sometimes. If you do that, then you can accept the flaws in other people more easily as well. So what we're really saying is that you really need to be able to talk about it. The other thing is be open and get support. You don't have to do this alone. Continue to learn and grow in your own role. Ask yourself, how did I do that? And what have I learned today? I have to tell you, I do that on a regular basis. When things are a little bit tough, or even when they're good, I ask myself, what did I learn about myself today? Give yourself permission to grow. Accept your strength and your limitation. Gain the experience, things like, something that I thought about, I didn't really think that I could do. And I was surprised at myself. Prioritize your health, eat healthy food, get some exercise, get fresh air. I can't emphasize that enough, how important that is. And if you need to go to a doctor, go for a checkup. Take care of your teeth. These are all very important things you need to do. Meditation, put on, it's so important. Let's do a little bit of like a little rehearsal. You can put on a favorite piece of music or listen to a CD, a tape, or nature of sounds, whatever you feel. Focus on your breathing. Breathing is really so helpful. Now, I also want to talk about journal your feelings, all right? This is an exercise that I practice what I preached. I really did use a journal, and I still use a journal to this day. It's just something that it's interesting to read and go back on and reflect. This is a time when you can be completely honest with yourself, because when you're finished writing all this, you can just destroy it if you want to. The point of this exercise is for you to gain a clear understanding of what and why you're feeling and the way you're feeling, okay? As you write, remember that feelings are just feelings. They're not always logical. In order to deal with them, you must first find what those feelings are and how they are affecting you. Write them down on a paper. On a computer can help you to do that. Writing can also help you to discover what is causing the emotion. You need to be aware of your feelings and their source. Once you understand the source of your emotion, the trick of expressing and releasing all that is so, so very, very important. Now, before we kind of open it up for discussions, I wanted to leave a nice chunk of time. See how that works out. I want to make a personal, that you could kind of do a personal declaration. Now, I don't have it in a PowerPoint, but as I'm talking now, I will do it. And if you're interested, you'll be able to get it. Think about the following self-statements and decide to make them as part of your daily life. So taking care of myself is necessary to continue my caregiving journey. I know my own limitations and strengths. I seek help when I need it. I have the right to feel what I feel and express those feelings in a calmer manner. I maintain the right to have my own outside life beside my caregiving role. I take pride in my accomplishments and in the courage it takes to perform these tasks. I realize that I cannot control the happiness of another person. I cannot fulfill all of his or her needs. No person can. I have the right of choice to decide what I will do or will not do. This includes the right to be not to be manipulated by anger, fear, or guilt, or by myself or by others. I have the right to feel rewarded for caring for a loved one and accepting my responsibilities. And the last slide, which you can then take it off, is just the references. There are wonderful articles that you can go back to and kind of get a little bit more information about what I was talking. So maybe we can take the slides off, and I would love to have a discussion. I know I said a lot, and maybe some people would like to reflect on that. And I was wondering if any of that sort of pertained to your experience. And I'm very open about sharing what I went through as well. And your comments are important. But the most important thing is when caregivers hear from other caregivers, how they're feeling and how they dealt with situations. And Glenda, I hope you join us as well in asking questions or making comments. I love when you do that.
I'm always willing and able to do that. So if you would like to join in the conversation at this time, we've left plenty of time for that. You can unmute your phone unmute your phone. I think there's one person that did end up dialing in, and you do that by pressing *6 on your phone. If you zoomed in, you can unmute your microphone or raise your hand, or the chat box is open and you can put questions and comments in the chat box. Oh, yes. Dee said she loved that declaration at the end. And I'm hoping, Lucy, you can send that to me and we'll get it up in the follow-up email that'll come out so everybody will have that information.
I definitely will. You know, it's interesting because I was just kind of thinking about it this morning. It was kind of too late to do anything about it. But I just felt that it was so important to give ourselves that kind of a declaration. There are others out there for caregivers, you know, to give yourself permission, but I will definitely do that.
Okay, that's great. And so I alluded to an email. If you register for the call today, there will be a follow-up email in a couple of days, and we'll include those resources, and we will also include that last quote that Lucy said. Dee says we tend to trap ourselves trying to make others happy, and that is so true. Definitely true.
Yeah, and as I said, we you know you can't make anybody happy. It takes a lot of effort, and especially, and the feeling that I feel that really gets in the way is the guilt. You know, there has to be acceptance. There has to be acceptance. You can't do everything. It's not. I remember, um, I just wanted to make my mother happy. You know, I wanted her to, but she had sad days, but she had sad days before she was even before she was even diagnosed. She had many medical problems as well. And so we have to be very conscious of that, that we don't have, not every day in our lives is a happy time, right? There's things that some days are better, some days are not. But it's that guilt, that feeling I'm a caregiver, I've got to do it, I've got to make everything okay. Well, you don't. And not only you don't, you can't.
Yeah. I think I agree with you 100% about the guilt part, but I also think a lot of it, Lucy, is about, and you touched on this, managing expectations, because we do that to ourselves. I do. I'll raise my hand on that one. You expect something, and when it doesn't turn out like what you expected, then you're disappointed, you're mad, whatever. But I think that's another thing that goes along with the guilt.
I see that there's something else on the
There
chat.
is. Deborah says the complete isolation for years is a very serious issue for me right now. I can't get away to be myself. I've lost all my friends and family can't help. Home care is $40 an hour. Gosh, Deborah. Yeah, that's a rough one. And then Darlene says, I feel that once a caregiver, always a caregiver.
Well, it's true. He wants a caregiver, is always a caregiver. But going back to the first person who was saying that they're so isolated. But you know, Glenda, there are a lot of services in the community. Honestly speaking, you don't have to do it alone. And I know that hiring private help, which even though I live in Canada, there are different resources that are available. I still had to pay for private help as well to maintain my mom at home because that's where she wanted to stay. But maybe you can touch on a little bit, Glenda, about what services and where they can reach out for support that is available free of charge.
Yeah. I was just thinking that same thing, Lucy. And Deborah, I was wondering if you reached out to your local area agency on aging. I was a AAA director for 17 years, and they have a federal mandate to serve caregivers, and they also receive funding that comes along with that. Many area agencies on aging do provide respite care. Each one is different, though. I have to say that, and it depends on where you are in the funding cycle as to whether they would have money to do that. But I think it's worth, if you have not done that, to reach out to your local area agency on aging. And it's pretty simple. All you do is dial 211 and ask for the number of that area agency on aging. And I'll also give you information in that follow-up email that has to do with other resources that you might reach out to. I was thinking about Elder Care Locator is also available, and they have a toll-free number, and I'll put that in the chat box for you, as well as their website. And so you can go there also and link up to services. Isolation is absolutely not a wonderful thing, and I think that it's since COVID, there has just been an upswelling of all kinds of online resources where maybe you aren't physically with someone else, but you can connect emotionally through support groups, blogs, all kinds of things that have popped up. So I would certainly encourage you to do that. Darlene says, I do caregiver support groups. How do we get the information to them? Ah, see, right there, Darlene just popped up with an idea. Um, so, Darlene, what I would say to you is our customer service number that I've posted on the chat box. If you can call and give her that information, and hopefully we can share that. Darlene may be in one area of the country, and perhaps you are not in that area, but I guarantee you we can work together and find someplace for you to reach out and get some support and help.
That's great. You see, this is what this is all about. That's what I wanted to do today in our discussion, to sort of bring up a topic. And so I'm just wondering if we always have healthcare workers on our program as well. And I'm wondering if any of you are feeling what the job that you're doing, how are you coping with your emotions and your feelings? Because we know that there's a shortage of healthcare workers in the healthcare, and definitely across Canada and across the United States. Love to hear from you.
Yeah, they usually share such important information with us about how they're coping and what's going on.
Right.
So we'd love to hear from you, any of you. I appreciate what Darlene has shared, and I appreciate what Deborah has shared too with her situation, which is not that uncommon, I have to say, right, Lucy?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. You know, isolation can be so different for so many people. I mean, it could be like really being isolated on your own. But isolation, you can feel isolated even in a room full of people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when caregivers tell me that a lot of friends don't call anymore, or family members, there's that apprehension of what the person is going to say or how they're going to behave. So it really is important to take it upon yourself, to do the best that you can, not to isolate yourself. There's so many amazing church activities or temples or whatever your religion might be, communities that you can reach out and find out what's going on.
So Sandy was kind and said, Lucy, Glenda, and participants, so awesome with the understanding and resources you share. I kind of feel like that's kind of my mission, Lucy, is to share those resources because, well, I've been doing this for 12 years on the caregiver teleconnection, and I hear people's stories and they break my heart, and I want to do something because that's our human nature. We want to do something to help. So thank you so much, Sandy, for that compliment.
Well, the other thing too, I mean, I've done a lot of research. I've lectured in conferences, as you gave my bio, and I now work in a university in the School of Social Work. But I really wanted to, it's really, unless you walk in the shoes of a caregiver, it's hard to understand what we went or are going through. And it was so important for me to allow myself to be transparent in my own feelings and admit that my journey was no different. I mean, in many ways it is, but in many ways it's no different in any whatever you're going through. Just because I did have all the knowledge and my profession allows me to be a support to other people, it took me a while. And one of the things that was the hardest thing for me was denial. I really was in denial about my mother's condition because I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to lose her. You know, as I said, I was an only child. My mother was a single mother. It was just the two of us for the longest time until I had my own family. And so it was hurtful, and I was afraid, and I was angry, and I was frustrated, not about necessarily caring for her, but frustrated about the disease. Like, why should this be happening? So I think that's why it's so important to accept your feelings and try to get to the bottom of it. And when I realized that there wasn't a choice, I could stay with those feelings or I can do something else with them. I could change my way of thinking about how I feel about that. I could, respect my mother for who she was at that time. And that was very important. And believe you me, she'd get angry at me many times. I would be very hurt. And I do have to say and this I don't think I've ever shared before on any of the shows, the most hurtful thing that she ever sort of said, and when she realized what was happening to her, that she felt that she didn't want to go on anymore.
Mm.
And that hurt me. Like, how could you say that to your daughter? I want you here. I had to deal with that. I see that there's a few other
Yes, absolutely. Morgan, as a social worker and caregiver specialist with the Caregiver SOS program, that is a WellMed program. It is hard for me to see the lack of awareness of free or accessible resources in the community. I agree with you 100%, Morgan. My job is to raise this awareness. Thankfully, when I cannot hold these teleconnection events with a senior center, I try to sit in to learn more for caregivers who cannot participate. That's wonderful, Morgan. Thank you so much.
And because you work with caregivers, and you're right, there are not enough resources in the community. I think one of the most important things is just to listen and have empathy, and just tell the person, I'm sorry you're going through this. Because just hearing that alone is validating what they're actually doing. So there's many different ways to approach this. There's many different ways to support people. But I thank you for that. Thank you so much.
And Dee thanks you for sharing that statement that your mother said that hurt you so much. Yeah.
It really brings tears to my eyes. Even today, she's no longer with us. But it was very hurtful. But I understood it. Like, once I changed that direction of my thinking, that it wasn't about me only, I understood why she felt the way she did.
Yeah. Sandy says, I beg people not to be afraid of hospice. And we talk about hospice on many of our sessions. And you are so right, Sandy. There's nothing to be afraid of there. After 4 years being my husband's sole caregiver, the respite that hospice provides, at least in a metropolitan area, and she's right there, services vary from place to place, was sometimes the only aspect that allowed me to keep him at home that he so desperately desired, and probably to keep your sanity also, Sandy.
That is such an important thing to think about. There was a time when I thought that I was the only one that can actually do a task for my mother the right way. That was the martyr syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I had to kind of step back and say, okay, let someone else, it might not be exactly the same, but how bad could it be? Like, what harm could they do? So recognizing that you're not yes, you might be the best one to do a certain task, but it's okay to let someone else do it differently. It's not the end of the world. As long as the person is still not put at risk, then do it. Allow yourself, give yourself permission to let others help you.
Right. That's an important skill for caregivers is to let someone else help you. And it's not, it's a feeling that nobody can do it like you can. I was a caregiver too. We didn't talk about that, but I was. And it's like nobody can do it like I can do it. But the point is, you're not stepping away totally. You're still there supervising and in and out and whatever. So you're letting go of a little bit. Absolutely. And Morgan says, yes, hospice has changed so much. Yes, and it has indeed. And we know that Alzheimer's is a terminal illness. And so there's nothing wrong with being evaluated by hospice. And maybe they say, oh, well, it's not quite time yet, but maybe in 3 months, whatever. So, it is a wonderful resource, wonderful resource. It's just that we hate to think about our loved one is nearing the end of their life.
That's true. Yeah. Yes, and for those of you who are our partners or spouses, what I was talking about, how the relationship changes, and all the losses that one has, and the role reversal and things like that. it's very important to keep in mind that that's going to happen, because in a way, if you kind of are expecting it and thinking that things will change, you don't get as angry when it actually happens, and the frustration. I totally believe in getting as much education about a disease as possible. You know, I taught dementia, but dementia is a variety of diseases. And even though it looks a lot alike in many ways, there are differences, meaning that if someone has, for example, Parkinson's and is showing dementia signs, could be different than any others. So education is so important, not isolating yourself, being able to, to recognize your feelings and change. I mean, nothing stays the same ever, even if you're not a caregiver, right? Things change for many reasons. You know, my daughter got married this summer, and there was a huge change for me because now she has her little husband, and I have to not be intrusive, even though I don't think I am, but it's still, should I call today or should I not call today? I already spoke to her once, so change is inevitable in our lives, regardless of what. And so it's important to kind of deal with that. And I do want to say, and it might not pertain to anyone listening today, but if you have any, if you had a history of any mental health issues in the past, and you're managing at the best of your ability, or seeing your doctor, but if things are changing and you feel that it's escalating, please get in touch with your healthcare provider, and make sure that things like have a check-in.
So Deborah gave us a little more information. Her husband has Parkinson's combined with Lewy body dementia. And yes, it is indeed very strange and bizarre, Deborah. That's one of those real toughies. And to have, those two, which often go hand in hand together, is just an unbelievably difficult situation to be in.
It is. And again, I don't want to diminish, even though I'm saying all what I'm saying. And yes, you have to accept. And yes, you need to change maybe your communications. There still is a lot of a stress attached to caregiving. But I guess the bottom line is to please remember that you really do not have to do this alone. You have to allow yourself to show your true self. I remember one example, and I've talked about it before. When my mother needed insulin shot, the nurse wanted to train me to give her the insulin shot. I'm petrified of needles, and I had to be honest and say, I'm sorry, I don't think that I can do this emotionally and physically. I knew she kind of looked at me, what kind of a daughter are you? But I had to be honest, because I couldn't take on that extra responsibility, no matter what she thought of me. I knew what I had to do, what's best for me and for my mother.
Yes, for sure. D indicates that both of the Parkinson's Foundation and Lewy body dementia have strong national foundations that could possibly provide support and financial help. So, Deborah, hopefully you've been in touch, or if not, you will get in touch with those organizations. I will also include those websites for you in case you do not have them. It's interesting, and I want to tell you how proud I am of you, Deborah, because you're out here and you're trying to get assistance for yourself. And I have a friend who lives in another state that I visited recently, and as a professional, I had my professional hat on, trying to help her identify what was going on with her husband. And from everything I can tell, he has Lewy body dementia and maybe some Parkinson's along with it, but she's in total denial and is frozen in space and can't make a move forward. So I'm so glad you're out there trying to help your husband and yourself with education and knowledge.
Yeah, it's like being one step ahead of the game. Denial is a really, really difficult emotion to get out of, because it's really not accepting. It's really
Mhm.
not accepting. And many times having individual counseling or being in a support group, it really does help to move that dial a little bit forward.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Uh,
Well, I was going to say, anybody else have a situation that they would like to bring up? Maybe how you're coping right now, how you're feeling about your caregiving journey, and have you lost your identity? Like Deborah says, she's isolated and dealing with a lot for sure. Especially during the holidays, that's a whole different issue. And we've had a whole bunch of podcast or sessions this month about dealing with the holidays. So
the
there is help available.
holidays are very, very difficult to maneuver, and we have had wonderful sessions on how to deal with the holidays. You know, at the end of the day, it's being able many times to just say, no, I can't do that. Or would you please host this year? Or let it be a potluck kind of a situation. Not to put all the burden on yourself. Yes, maybe your family expects that of you if you have adult children. Well, you can always say, for this year, this is what. So saying no is a good thing. Okay. It's not a negative thing. And I have to say that for myself, there were times when I had to say no. I had to say no to my own children. Not this year, my dear. We're going to try to do it next year. Anyways, I'm just looking at the time, and I know that you have, I just want to really thank you. I hope that doing it, the format this way today, gave people more of an opportunity to talk, and for all. And if any of you are healthcare workers, thank you so much for what you do. And for all you caregivers, I get you. I understand where you're coming from. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel, as I said, and I'm repeating myself. I didn't have to do it alone. I thought I did, but I didn't at the end. Once I got the help that I needed, things were much better.
I kind of had to laugh when you were talking about the preparation of the meal and let someone else do it. I relate that to caregiving. So if you let go and let somebody else do the dressing, the turkey, the stuffing, it may not be yours and you may not like it as well, but you didn't have to prepare it. And so I am thinking that is a blessing in all kinds of ways. So let me tell you just about what's coming up on the Caregiver Teleconnection. Always the calendar is out there talking about the holidays. Monday, this coming Monday on the 12th at noon, Managing the Holidays, interactive discussion on how to cope with Xanda Hilger. And so I would encourage you, if you're facing the holidays and are having some problems, some difficulties, some feelings, and I know you're having feelings, tune into that session. And then I just wanted to kind of promote myself, because on Friday, December the 16th at 11 o'clock Central Time, another one of our presenters, Evelyn Greb, and I are going to do a presentation on avoiding the potholes of dementia journey. And it's going to be done, it's a serious conversation. It's going to be done with some humor. And so I hope you will tune in for that session. I'm kind of doing both now. I'm being a facilitator, I'm also being a presenter. And so it's fun for me, and I hope you'll join us for that session. We have a couple of more minutes. Does anybody else have a question or a comment that they would like to share? We'd love to hear from you. All right. Anything else that you would like to go over, Lucy, before we end the session today?
No, I just want to thank everybody, and I want to wish everybody a very, very happy holiday. And may this new year bring us all peace of mind. Health is the most important, and just keep going through your journey together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Thank you. Your comments were insightful.
I got one. I'm
Darlene,
sorry. I'm
Darlene, hi
sorry.
there. Hi, go ahead.
Hi. I know I've been at the gym. I would like to take the time to say one of our caregiver warriors, Buffy Hankinson, she worked with the Alzheimer's Association. She passed away about almost 3 weeks ago, unexpected.
Hmm.
Please keep her family in your prayers because she walked, slept, she lived Alzheimer's for everybody. And she worked day and night for the organization and those that needed help. So please, if you look her up on Facebook, all you see is all her posts about walking for Alzheimer's or working for the association. But her name is Buffy Hankinson, and I really don't want her efforts forgotten. Thank you.
Well, our condolences to your community and their loss, Darlene. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
My condolences as well. That's really sad to lose a colleague and a champion for Alzheimer's.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah, a champion and a warrior. Absolutely. We need more people like Buffy.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. And I do wish you the best of all holiday seasons coming up. I admire you so for the work that you do for the people you care for. And I will always be here for you as much as I possibly can. So hopefully we'll see you on next sessions, and look for that follow-up email, and
Yes.
and I'll put some resources there for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Glenda.
You're welcome.